Today, we're going to dive into a massive shift in the science of autism support. We're going to look at how the goals and the methods have totally evolved from trying to fix people to, instead, empowering them to thrive. So, let's start with a really fundamental question, one that has completely reshaped the entire field. What is the real goal of autism support? Believe me, the answer is not what it used to be. All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll unpack the new goals for support. Then, we'll explore this critical move from a fixing to a fitting mindset. After that, we'll peek inside the modern toolkit, see what the evidence actually says, and then wrap it all up with what is, without a doubt, the single most important principle in this field today. So let's jump right in with that new goal. This is a huge step away from the old and frankly often harmful idea of normalization. Today, the focus is squarely on empowerment, and what that really means is enhancing an autistic person's quality of life, supporting communication that actually works for them, maximizing their own autonomy and independence, and helping them participate in their communities, but on their own terms. This quote just nails it, doesn't it? The goal isn't to change who a person is. It's about minimizing the challenges they face and giving them the tools and skills they need to live a self-reliant, autonomous life. And that new goal leads us right to our next big idea, this shift from a fixing mindset to a fitting one. And look, this isn't just a tiny tweak, it's a complete paradigm shift in how we even understand disability. Okay, so the old way, the traditional approach, was what's known as the medical model. It basically saw autism as a problem inside the person that needed to be treated or fixed, focusing on all these so-called deficits. This image just visualizes the idea perfectly. With the medical model, you see a person in a wheelchair at the bottom of some stairs. The problem is seen as the person's inability to climb. So the solution must be to fix the person. The entire focus is on changing the individual to overcome the barrier. But today, the thinking has totally flipped. We've moved to social and biopsychosocial models. Now, these frameworks, which include what researchers call transactional models, see it differently. They understand that disability isn't just in the person. It arises from the mismatch, the friction between a person and their environment. And this is the new approach. The social model looks at that exact same scene and says, wait a minute, let's just build a ramp. Instead of trying to fix the person, you remove the barrier in the environment. You change the world to fit the person, not the other way around. It's a game changer. And that's really what it all boils down to, this powerful concept, improving the goodness of fit. It's about creating a world where an autistic person's unique way of being can actually thrive because the environment supports it. So how do we actually do that? How do we achieve this goodness of fit? Well, that brings us to the modern intervention toolkit and the key categories of support that are being used today. So broadly speaking, we can sort these supports into 4 main areas. You've got your traditional behavioral approaches. Then there's a newer blended category called naturalistic developmental behavioral interventions, or NDBIs for short. You also have supports focused just on communication, like AAC devices. And finally, you have strategies that empower parents to be key partners in the whole process. This table really highlights a fascinating evolution in the field. You can see this clear shift from the more traditional, very structured, adult-led approaches to these newer NDBIs, which are often child-led, happen in natural settings, like during playtime, and use the kind of rewards that are naturally motivating. It really represents a move from the clinic to the living room, which is so important because that's how skills actually stick in real life. And this definition just sums it all up, right? NDBIs are about weaving support into the very fabric of a child's everyday life. You use their natural motivations and daily routines as the foundation for learning. It's basically learning through living. But, of course, a new approach is only as good as the evidence behind it. So, what does the research actually tell us? Does this stuff work? Well, first thing to know is that this field is expanding incredibly fast. The number of high-quality studies, we're talking randomized controlled trials, has literally doubled in recent years. We know more right now than we ever have before. So what's the big takeaway from all that research? Well, we have strong evidence that these NDBIs are really effective for supporting social communication. We also know that behavioral interventions still work well for teaching specific targeted skills. But, and this is a big but, There are still huge gaps, especially when it comes to long-term outcomes for adults. And we've got to get better at measuring what actually matters for a person's well-being and quality of life. And that brings us to our final, and you could argue our most critical point, the principle of individualization. If you take just one thing away from our whole conversation today, please let it be this. Because autism is so incredibly diverse, there is simply no one-size-fits-all approach. The golden rule is that support must be tailored to the individual. And when we say individualization, that means considering everything: a person's cognitive abilities and language level, their unique sensory needs, any other conditions they might have, and, so importantly, their personal strengths and their family's culture and values. One really powerful way this is put into practice is through what's called a stepped care approach. Think of it as a flexible model where support isn't static. It's constantly being adjusted in its intensity and its goals as a person grows and their needs naturally change over their lifetime. So we'll end by sort of reframing that question we started with, because maybe the goal isn't to find the one single best intervention. Maybe the more powerful and the more effective question we should all be asking is simply this: what does this individual need to thrive?